Death Battle is back. After the unfortunate closure of Rooster Teeth earlier this year, the future of Death Battle seemed very uncertain. Thankfully, the team behind Death Battle purchased Death Battle and then went to Kickstarter to fund themselves a whole new season, which itself got funded in only 20 minutes. And eventually, over a month, managed to rake in $740,000, almost 10 times the asking price of $75,000, of which has funded the production of 21 episodes of Death Battle, plus a bonus one there. So the future for the series is looking quite bright. And of those 21 episodes, we do know 11 of them. So I'm going to have a look through them and share my thoughts on what the future of Death Battle looks like. Wile Coyote vs. Tomcat. This one won the Tournament of Champions last year, and I'm going to be honest, it was one of the ones that I did not really want. Like, just looking at the Tournament of Champions, honestly, the week it came from I felt was extremely weak. Week 4 I did not like that much. But also, all the ones that I liked didn't really make it that far. Comparatively, week 1, not that much, but I do think Core Sensei and Monokuma is fun. Gru Megamind is... sure. It's just kind of like, yeah, of course it's good. I don't need to think about that. I did think Mac vs. Ippo would have been fun, though, because, you know, it's been a while since we had a boxing match. Week 3, Ragna vs. Velvet. I haven't played the Tales games, but, you know, I would like to see Ragna again. Scorpion vs. Wolf. I haven't played Sekiro. Would love to see Scorpion again, though. That was kind of my thought process on this. Didn't really care for Sailor Moon Madoka, but I'm glad it won over Composite Ryu vs. Composite Goku. I think that one is stupid and I don't like it. Week 4 was just generally weak and I didn't care for it. Week 5, Homer vs. Peter I thought was great. Naruto vs. Luffy I don't like, which is good because it didn't win. We need to find an actual good matchup for Luffy. We can't really find one. Natsu is kind of the only one that everyone can kind of agree on. It's like, that would be pretty cool. I would like Captain Marvelous. I think that would be fun, but that's just because I like Sentai. But, you know, Kratos Asura won that week. Week 6, Percy Zagreus I did like. I thought Groval Lucina is great. X Primal won that one. I haven't watched Beast Wars, so I'm very unfamiliar with him. Week 7, the one that won that deserved to win because it was fucking Palpatine versus Anakin. The other ones were honestly whatever. Spike Revy's okay. I don't care for Hulk Godzilla, but we'll get back to that. And I also don't care for Ellie Clementine. And then we get, I don't know, it was just kind of Halloween themed. It was kind of set up for Sans vs. Judge to win, I guess. But I do think Grinch vs. Jack Skellington is fun. And I was definitely convinced by the Death Battle cast that Skeletor vs. Zed would be great. And now to end the Tournament of Champions tangent, and we'll get back to Wile Coyote vs. Tom. It'll probably be fun. I just think it kind of won the Tournament of Champions based on, you know, current events of, you know, Coyote vs. Acme was in the news very heavily. And then also because Scooby Courage just came out and everyone was kind of like, yo, they should just do Scooby Courage again. And I don't think they're gonna do Scooby Courage again. It'll have to be something different. It'll probably be fine. It's not the one I want. But now let's move on to the ones that are actually announced new for this season.
You should have died at birth.
You're the one who's gonna die!
Omni-Man VS Bardock. This was one that was definitely getting thrown around whenever Omni-Man was like, when the first season of Invincible was still pretty fresh, and everyone was like saying like, oh, they should do Omni-Man. Like, Omni vs. Homelander was definitely the one people were throwing out, but people were like, well, it's just a fucking stomp on Omni-Man's favor. And then they did it, and it was a fun episode. But Omni-Man vs. Bardock was definitely one that other people wanted to see, and I definitely get it. And it'll be fun to see. I'm not 100% like dying for it, but I do think it's a fun one. Bardock is like, I did watch his special, like the first one at least, and it was pretty neat. I played him in Fighters when, you know, he was new, and since the end of season 2 of Invincible, I have since read the entire comic book of Invincible, so I do know more or less the whole story, and it is a pretty good comic book, and it'll be interesting to see like them expand more on Omni-Man than they did whenever they focused on him for Omni-Man versus Homelander, because they couldn't really go that far. They could only go as far as season 1 stuff, and then season 2 at least showed more of like what Nolan will become I don't really know who wins or really actually care that much. I don't really like the ones where it is just they kind of are just strong and it ends up just being who has the bigger number. I like whenever they have like weird gimmicks, and I'll get back to weird gimmicks later. But let's see the other one they announced in the Kickstarter trailer.
I finally found it. Now who's gonna stop me?
Papa's got a brand new stash.
Visor versus Eggman. Now this one is fine. Like, I'm not mad at it. It definitely makes sense. And, you know, it's been forever since Eggman's been on the show. I mean, hell, he was on the show back when Bam was animating it. But this is also a very popular matchup that people have been talking about for a while. So I've kind of just grown sick of seeing people being like, yo, they should do Visor versus Eggman. It's gonna be Visor versus Eggman this season. It's just kind of frustrating when you're kind of exposed to it for that much. Other than that, you know, the animation looks like it's gonna be really cool. They're gonna do like their army stuff, which they did for Eggman last time, but they didn't do for Visor last time he was on it. It'll be interesting to see, but I'm just not the most like engaged. I'm definitely a little sick of Sonic characters in Death Battle, which I will, again, we will get back to that later. So the next one that got announced was in fact a bonus episode, which was...
I'll take a potato chip and eat it.
Oh, listen, there's one other thing I wanted to ask you about.
Light versus Columbo. So this is a stupid matchup. It is a joke that then kept going until it kind of stopped being a joke. But given that it's not a full episode of Death Battle, it is a bonus episode, probably more in line with Raiden vs. Excalibur and the 7 Battle Royale. I am very for it. It should be a fun interaction between these two characters. And I do think it's a funny matchup just in the sense of like, I don't know how Light wins because his main thing, the Death Note, won't work on Columbo. He doesn't know his name. No one knows what Columbo's first name is. And then the answer to that is, well, you can give him the Shinigami eyes. But Light very explicitly says in the series when they introduce the concept of Shinigami eyes, why the hell would I take that deal? So that's out of character. You can't have the character do things out of character. At least that's usually how they roll in Death Battle. But we'll see how they kind of examine it. It could just be a funny, like, dumb episode. And I've heard the last one we saw some animation for during the live stream.
My vengeance is everything. I forgive you. Making my daughter cry!
Kratos versus Asura. This is another one that kind of falls in the same group as Visor vs. Eggman, which is that it's a neat matchup. It makes sense. I do kind of like it, but people have been asking for it for so long. I'm kind of annoyed about it, but I'm not going to be that mad, especially from the clip that we saw because it looks cool as hell. The main issue I have is that like I'm familiar with Asura's stuff. Like I've seen Asura's Wrath. I haven't played it, but I do have, and I want to go through it. And Kratos, I have not gone through the God of War series. There's many games. I should definitely go back into those because they're I think they're pretty emblematic of that era of PlayStation. But again, I didn't have a PlayStation. I had an Xbox. But other than that, it'll be interesting, especially how are they gonna do Kratos, given the kind of disparate natures of the Greek era and Norse era of the games. Are they just gonna give him all of the items that he collected in both games? Does that make sense? I'm unsure. I did watch an LP of God of War, the first Norse one. I don't know what happens in Ragnarok. And I probably just want to play that one, actually. I'm sure it will be a cool fight. It's getting animated by Devil Artemis. He usually makes good episodes. The only time he made one that wasn't that great was whenever he was kind of, I think, a mix of like natural disaster, and I don't think his talents really blended that well for Jason versus Mike. Like it just kind of, they moved a little too fast for what kind of characters they are. I think the tone they were going for is fine, but now I'm on a tangent. So what was the next stretch goal they reached?
Domain expansion. Self-embodiment of perfection! I will obliterate your dreams.
Mahito vs Shigaraki. This one is fine, I guess. I did see the G1 blog for this one back whenever that got put out. I think I actually read that before I saw Mahito, or like I kind of didn't recognize him, or maybe I went back to read it after I actually read some of Jujutsu Kaisen. But I will say, especially because of how like kind of short-lived he is, Mahito is actually one of the villains. He is probably the only villain that I was like, okay, there's like some fucking stuff going on, and also he is responsible for like the most fridged character I've seen in any fucking piece of media ever, which might say something for my limited scope of media that I've seen, but it's real fucking bad. And Shigaraki is definitely a mess because of how My Hero Academia kind of ended up. But it'll be interesting to see how they interact, because they both at least have the gimmick of like, if they touch you, you're fucked. So how will they get around that? But also, because we're going from the peak, this will be Shigaraki with All for One, which gives him like a million superpowers. So we'll see how that kind of interacts with someone that can just like manipulate souls. I don't know how interested people are in this one. It's definitely this is probably the least or second to least like hyped matchup that got on the stretch goals, I think. One that did get hyped though was
Pikachu! Use Thunderbolt!
It's time to duel!
Ash versus Yugi. This is a debate that's been going on for decades, since the 90s, whenever Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon were contemporaries. And I do think this is an actually very interesting debate because of how their systems kind of interact with one another. The main thing for me is, if it becomes a shadow game, and it will because Yugi can just use the Millennium Puzzle to do that, he kind of has it feels to me like he kind of has no way to lose. He can kind of determine what the rules of the game are, and then if Ash inadvertently breaks those rules, he's subject to a punishment game. And then also, Yu-Gi-Oh! Characters can just kind of top deck whatever they want. The main issue I have with like arguments is always just like, well, what if Ash just throws all of his Pokemon at Yugi before he can start it? And the issue I always have with the arguments that I've seen, and it's seemingly been in now, because I actually have argued this one, is that people that support Ash more like try and limit Yugi to the game of Duel Monsters, but Ash is not limited by the rules of Pokemon battles and how they're established. Like, they're always like, what is he gonna do when he throws 80 fucking dragons and Kais and ninja frogs at him? But he shouldn't be allowed to do that because he's only allowed to hold 6 of them, and he's only allowed to throw out 1 at a time, maybe 2 if the rules allow for it. If Ash is not bound by the rules of his game, why is Yugi bound by the rules of his? And if Yugi then starts a shadow game, Ash is then now bound by the rules of whatever game that is being put out there. So it feels like that's my argument for it. It's definitely like a stat versus hacks, I guess, is kind of the idea. But then also, I've heard some fucked up things about like those god cards and like greater gods that he can summon. This is probably like the one I'm second most hyped for, I guess. One thing that annoyed me is that it didn't label itself on the stretch goal that this would be episode 200. There's one that coming up later that I feel more deserves the episode 200 slot, which we'll get back to. But that wasn't the only hype episode they announced in that.
My drill is the drill that creates the heavens!
Let those who worship evil's might beware my power. Green Lantern's light.
Simon the Digger versus Kyle Rayner the White Lantern. So this one has been going around for a while, and it's definitely a fun one. It's one that I've definitely seen and thought, yeah, that's neat and cool, but I was always kind of like thrown by like, but doesn't there need to be other people in the robot to pilot it? And according to things, probably not, but that's because I haven't seen the Gurren Lagann movies, mostly because I've heard that they are just the series again, and I have already seen the series. but maybe I should go watch the movies. Kyle Rayner, I don't read comic books that much, and definitely none that had Kyle Rayner in it. I should probably check out Blackest Night though, like that storyline. That might be interesting, because I do enjoy the concept of the Lantern Corps. But this one is definitely hyped up, which is probably a little dangerous, because if you get a little too hyped up, people will get disappointed if it doesn't meet that hype. This one is definitely exciting. And then also has probably the best custom track that was made by Brandon Yates. Will the Drill is a pretty cool track. I don't think there's anything that really needs to be said. This one is a good one. It was on the ballot for season 10, though it lost out to Bill vs. Discord. They did not share the votes on that one. The only one we know is that Kratos vs. Asura got second in the 3D poll. Outside of that, we don't know. But it is clearly one that people want. But it's been known for a while, and now we're getting it. And one that I've wanted for a while.
Justice will be swift! Justice will be painful! It will be delicious! A sound soul dwells within a sound mind and a sound body.
Ruby versus Maka. So whenever I said I was kind of disappointed that Ash versus Yugi was labeled as like, this is episode 200, that's because I feel Ruby versus Maka should be episode 200. Like, it's a landmark title, and Ruby vs. Maka is a landmark episode. The entire series was inspired by Heloid, by Monty Ohm. Whenever they got working with Rooster Teeth, Monty was like, yo, you should do Ruby vs. Maka, but also hold off so that Ruby can get more stuff to show off, so maybe do like Yang vs. Tifa. So I feel like it's an important episode. Like, Ash vs. Yugi might be important to, like, I guess, just general verses, but I feel like Ruby vs. Maka is important to Death Battle. But that's just me. Outside of that, very excited for this one. I'm rereading Soul Eater right now so that I actually remember what happened in Soul Eater, because it's been years since I read it. And I am caught up on Ruby. It'll be interesting to see how they interact with stuff, because there's definitely more magic nonsense in Soul Eater, whereas Ruby is definitely, she doesn't really do lots of dust stuff. It is mostly just Scythe, Semblance, and then the Silver Eyes, which should do nothing because they only really affect Grimm. But again, it should be really fun and really cool. I'm very excited for it. One that people weren't as excited for was
Flameo, Hotman!
Windblade!
Aang vs. the Traveler. So I definitely don't play Genshin. I have no goddamn clue who this Traveler person is. However, they did state during whenever this got announced on the stretch goals that it was kind of a passion project for DJ. And he made some pretty solid episodes and did some cool edits. DJ wrote some cool episodes and did a lot, so he would probably do a good job on this one. The issue is I don't care for Genshin. That definitely is a game that has a less than stellar reputation from my very limited knowledge. And then the last time Aang was on, people did not care for that episode. I understand the things like, well, he's a pacifist, he can't be killing. It's like, this is Death Battle though, he has to kill the person. He can't just not kill them. Again, it'll at least be interesting for me as someone that doesn't play Genshin to understand the mechanics of how that world works. I'm very familiar with the mechanics of the Avatar: The Last Airbender universe. I have watched all of it. I even read some of the comics. Not all of them, because I'm pretty sure there's more since I stopped reading them. However, then, because that one wasn't getting hype and the kind of Kickstarter was kind of fumbling a little bit then, they essentially pushed this back to a previous stretch goal where it was already confirmed, and then replaced it with the next matchup.
Hulk is strongest there is!
Hulk versus Godzilla. So that was one that was in the Tournament Champions last year. It lost to Palpatine versus Xehanort. And it's definitely one that I'm not a huge fan of. Mostly just, I definitely don't love the size differential. I like Godzilla, I like Hulk well enough. I just don't think the idea, especially Godzilla fighting Hulk. Hulk fighting Godzilla, that's probably cool, he's punching big guy. But Godzilla just like fucking swatting like a little green fly that's fucking about the place. I don't think that's very interesting. And until he just decides, I'm gonna nuke the planet, I guess. Depends what they use for Godzilla. Are they only using Toei stuff? Are they giving him Monsterverse stuff? Are they giving him those weird animes where he like kind of eat a universe or some nonsense? The same with Hulk. Are they giving him all stuff? Are they giving him his immortal stuff? Are they gonna give him... They're probably gonna give him World Breaker stuff. Really the one I think is immortal Hulk stuff, because I don't know if he still has that in the comics, because that run was like 10 years ago. Again, that's one I'm not the most interested in, but it would be nice to see Godzilla back. And then the final one, which they actually did not hit, but then they were like, you know what, because you were so cool, we'll do this one as well. That one being...
You're going to suffer the wrath of Gru!
Incredibly handsome criminal genius and master of all villainy.
Gru versus Megamind. Again, this one made it to the second round of the Tournament Champions last year. It's clearly one people want, and since that Tournament Champions, there has been new content for Megamind, which he didn't have for the longest time. He just had his movie, and that was about it. And now there is a second movie and a TV show. They may not be very good, but that's more content. Gru, on the other hand, has had several movies and an entire spin-off series. So it'll be fun to analyze them. Mostly because, at least in my biased opinion, I thought Megamind was a better movie than Despicable Me, but he doesn't have all the stuff for it. It'll be fun. It should be at least a really entertaining fight, with all their like wacky gadgets and such. I mean, what's Gru gonna do when he gets turned into a dehydrated cube? And that is all of the matchups that were announced through this Kickstarter. Though there was a couple bonus things thrown in there, such as episode will be animated hand-drawn by Luis, similar to his efforts with Samurai Jack vs. Afro Samurai and Scooby vs. Courage. So that one will probably be cool as fuck. They will bring back Torian for one of the 3D episodes, which that will be neat. We haven't seen him animate Death Battle in a while, and he's probably like one of the people that made Death Battle kind of blow up in quality, honestly. And then the biggest one is that one of the matchups will be made in live action by Ismahawk, who were responsible for Nightwing vs. Daredevil, as well as Red Hood vs. Winter Soldier, which will be cool as fuck. The only real issue is just what would they do? Because if it's another Marvel vs. DC, that's going to be a little disappointing, even though we do know that is kind of their preference, given what they did. Would it be really cool if they did like a Toku character? That would be sick as fuck. But the last thing to bring up here that is most interesting in terms of matchups is the rematch vote. One of the episodes that will be made this year will be a rematch of a previously made Death Battle episode, but it will be voted on by Kickstarter backers. So everyone had their own choices going into this that they wanted to see remade, but when the time to vote came up, there were only 10 that actually made it into the choices. So let's all take a moment of silence for all the episodes that would have been cool if they got remade. So the episodes that were available for the vote include the Ninja Turtles Battle Royale, Mario vs. Sonic, Master Chief vs. Doom Guy, Zelda vs. Peach, Terminator vs. Robocop, Gaara vs. Toph, Yang vs. Tifa, Mewtwo vs. Shadow, Tracer vs. Skype, and Ben 10 vs. Green Lantern. These can kind of be gathered into 3 groups. Those 3 being people were mad at the outcome of the original episode, people have been asking for this as a rematch for a while, and I'm just gonna say other. So, of being mad at the result, those ones would be Gaara vs. Toph, Yang vs. Tifa, and Bantan vs. Green Lantern. Of these, I don't really think any of them should get the remake. Gara vs. Toph, I don't really care if any of them are right or wrong for the most part. I don't think the fact that it was wrong really qualifies it need a remake. I think the things that qualify it needing a remake is whether or not the conversation around the debate has changed significantly due to either new interpretations of stuff or just straight up new content, which we'll get back to with one of the ones that I definitely want to see. Of these three, that the only one I would probably want to see would be Yang vs. Tifa, because there has been new stuff for Tifa, there has been new stuff for Yang, and clearly their interpretation of how Final Fantasy VII characters work is much different from how it was back then. Gara vs. Toph has not been really anything for Gara, been very little for Toph. I do think this was before Toph reappeared in Legend of Korra though, so there's probably something there. But I don't think it's that interesting to go back and do. And Ben 10 vs. Green Lantern, there's probably been a bunch of Green Lantern comics, but that honestly only just makes it more likely for him to win over Ben 10. And people are just gonna get mad anyway. They would just have to spend like fucking 40 minutes just explaining themselves at the end of the episode. It won't be that interesting. In terms of people have been asking for it for a while, that would be Mario vs. Sonic, Master Chief vs. Doomguy, Mewtwo vs. Shadow, and Tracer vs. Skype. Of this, I really do not care for Mario vs. Sonic. We already did that rematch. We don't need it again. I don't need to see it a third time. I didn't want to see Goku vs. Superman a third time, and we did. And it was good, but I didn't need to see it a third time. Of the other ones, I'll say it outright, Master Chief vs. Doomguy is my main choice. Because, again, the conversation is way different now, because there's been an entire trilogy of Halo games since that episode came out, and an entire soft reboot of the Doom series. The conversation is completely different. Maybe the verdict is different now, but it would just be way more interesting now, because the characters are so much different. Mewtwo vs. Shadow, people were just mad at that episode, and here's the thing, again, I am really tired of Sonic characters in Death Battle. I feel like we've gotten so many Sonic characters. We've gotten at least, I think, one a year. There's been a Sonic character in all but almost every season of this show. It's a fairly saturated franchise, and we are already getting a Sonic character in a confirmed episode, being Eggman. So just having another Shadow episode, which would make it his 4th episode. I don't know if anyone deserves 3 episodes. Definitely not 4. Batman didn't deserve 4. And also, I think Mewtwo is lame. I don't like him, so I don't really want to see him. And in terms of Tracer vs. Skype, I would just kind of prefer a different TF2 episode. Either, like, Soldier vs. Sarge even, but, you know, primarily Medic vs. Richtofen would be the one I want. And I really don't care about another Overwatch episode. Like, Overwatch has burned any goodwill I have ever had for that series. Especially whenever they killed single-player stuff, I didn't care. And that one definitely leans into the, like, oh, is there new stuff? Was there any new stuff? Again, I stopped paying attention. Was there any, like, story content? Because there was none when the fucking episode came out. In terms of other, I'm just including this as just, like, these are, like, kind of weird choices to me. Being the Ninja Turtles Battle Royale, Zelda vs. Peach, and Terminator vs. RoboCop. Ninja Turtles Battle Royale is actually one that I thought would be a cool idea to redo, because it was not the most well done episode, because it was so early in the series, but it would still be a fun idea to revisit with new eyes, especially with how would you interpret, like, the various types of the Ninja Turtle characters. Zelda vs. Peach is a weird one just because it feels like one that, who was asking for a remake of this one? It's not the most compelling. And I definitely am in the camp of, when this episode came out, you could recreate this fight in Smash Brothers, I don't think it's that compelling. That's one of the reasons why I did not like Bowser vs. Ganondorf that much. If after the fact you can, that's different, I guess, because you can kind of do that in a lot of fucking death battles, honestly. Terminator vs. RoboCop is also a weird one, mostly because I think the original Terminator vs. RoboCop still holds up. It's jank and dated, but it's part of the charm, I think. Like, you could go back and have Torian redo it, it would be way better looking. It would also be way shorter, because that fight is like at least 6 minutes, I want to say. But I feel like that's part of the charm, is that how early it was. And if they were to redo it, they would have to get that city back, I feel. So in the end, everyone got 2 choices. I myself pledged my votes towards Master Chief vs. Doomguy and the Ninja Turtle Battle Royale. I hope Master Chief vs. Doomguy wins. I think that is the most interesting one that they can make. And that's all there is to talk about with the current future of Death Battle. A lot to look forward to, and it's going to be starting real soon. I'll be excited. Hopefully some fighting game characters, hopefully some Toku characters, stuff that is just for me will show up in the near future of Death Battle.